Hello everybody. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than normal because today we're going to combine Gravely garden tractors with woodworking. How so, you may ask? Well, today we are going to turn this piece of oak firewood from our Wisconsin property into one of these, a wood handlebar grip for an early model L garden tractor. Those of you who followed my 1943 restoration series, you may remember that I had to buy a set of wood handlebar grips for that project. At the time, I didn't have the equipment to make them myself, so I reached out to a guy out of Michigan by the name of Brian Mitchell. He makes reproduction grips, does an incredible job. It's fast turnaround. His prices are more than reasonable. If you want to buy a set of grips, I cannot recommend him enough. You can find him either on Facebook, on any of the Gravely garden tractor groups, or drop me a comment and I will get his contact information to you. But I'm a do-it-yourselfer at heart, and a couple of months ago I was given this 1960s Craftsman wood lathe. It's in incredible condition, so I figured it was time for me to learn how to make a set myself. So let's go ahead and walk through that process and see how it's done. Okay, the first thing I did on the piece of wood is I marked my centers so I can go ahead and get the wood set up in the lathe. And I'm going to apologize in advance. This lathe is a little cumbersome to adjust at times because it's just not as easy as the newer one. So I do apologize if it takes me a little longer than it should to get everything set sometimes. I already set the tool rest. Everything's nice and clear. Hit the switch. Spins free, and we've got it on the slowest speed possible. So now we're going to use a roughing gouge. We're going to round this thing off. But before I do that, I want to talk quickly about safety. If you're using a lathe, you are using razor sharp tools to shave a piece of wood that is spinning at high speed right by your face. This can get very dangerous. So you'll notice I've got my sleeves rolled up above my elbows. And at some point you will probably notice that I'm wearing one of these, a face shield. Just be safe about these things. There's no reason to cut corners and hurt yourself. So my sleeves are rolled up, my face shield is on, and let's go ahead and get this rounded off. Now that we've got it all rounded off, you'll notice that there's these little insect holes in there where little bugs were born into this stuff as it was sitting in my firewood pile. These aren't really a problem because these grips are going to be painted anyway. They're not going to be, finished in wood stain. Once I get these filled in and painted, you'll never know they were there. There's not a structural problem. It's no issue really. So next thing I need to do is kind of figure out where I want to position this grip on this piece of wood, and then I need to cut a tenon and part off a little bit on this end so I can flip this around and put this in a different type of chuck, and you'll see the reason for that here in a moment. So let's go ahead and do that. This is why we cut a tenon in this piece of wood. So I removed the spur drive that was in the lathe and put this 4-jaw chuck on instead. And these 4 jaws will compress around that tenon and allow me to hold this piece of wood nice and secure without the tailstock in place, because I need to swing this out of the way to go ahead and drill a 4 1/4 inch deep hole into this piece of wood so that ultimately we could slide it over the handlebar. So let's go ahead and drill that hole out, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to pull the tailstock. We're going to replace what's called our live center with this. It's just a drill chuck with an extension and a 1-inch Forstner bit that we're going to, as the wood's spinning, we're going to plunge it into the wood to drill that hole out that we need. And this is just a taper here. It's just press fit in. So it's pretty easy to pop this loose. Really didn't want it to come flying out, but it is what it is. So let's slide this back. That just taper fits in. And now we're going to line up the little tip on the Forstner bit with the center mark on the wood. We're going to lock this into place. And this is where this lathe is really slow, because a new modern lathe has got a nice crank on the end. This has just got this wheel, so this does take quite a bit of time. You'll notice that I'm going to have some work gloves on for this process. The reason is I don't want to get a blister rolling this wheel back and forth, but don't ever go near anything spinning with work gloves on, because if it catches those gloves, it's just going to rip your fingers right off. Now let's go ahead and drill that hole out. All right, we've got the hole bored to the depth we need, but the problem is that right now this handlebar will not fit into this hole. It'll start because I worked this edge a little bit more, but it won't go all the way in. The reason being is these handlebars are a little larger than 1 inch, a little smaller than 1 1/8 inches. So they're right in between the sizes of Forstner bits I've got. So what I'm going to have to do now is take this bowl gouge and just widen this hole up a little bit until this handlebar will fit all the way in. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now that we've got the hole bored out to the right depth, and we've got it opened up, so the handlebar bottoms out. I'm going to take this out. We're going to slide the tailstock in. We're going to put the live center right into that hole. Tighten it up a little bit. And that is going to make sure that we have got this thing centered up so we can turn the outside of the grip. Now, when I first started thinking about how to do this, again, I'm very new to wood turning, so this is not a how to use a lathe video by any stretch. But when I first started trying to figure out how to do this, I decided to drill the hole first, then do the outside of the grip, because that way you're turning the outside of the grip and you're centering up the hole around it. So everything is nice and centered up. I figured if I turned the grip and then tried to drill the hole, the odds of getting this dead center were pretty slim. So drill the hole first, then do the outside of the grip. When I bought my 43, there were a set of these original rings. I think they were sitting on a handlebar on another tractor. And the guy was nice enough to let me keep them because I figured at some point I'm going to try to make my own grips. So the first thing that I'm going to turn now is this piece here where the ring slides over. So I've marked it with a pencil, made it a little bit long because I'll trim this off on a benchtop sander when I'm done. So I am going to set my calipers to the correct diameter. Actually, I'll leave it just a little bit large, this inside diameter. And I'm going to turn it and use the calipers to tell me when to stop. There we go. Okay, so got the rings fit. Okay, now it is time to lay out the rest of the grip. So, got a little diagram here. So the grip's about 1 3/4 inches wide. So the first thing I want to do is I want to turn this down to 1 3/4 inches. And we'll turn it all the way back to here just to be on the safe side so we got some extra to work with. So 1 3/4 inches from there out. Okay, we've got it turned to our rough outer dimensions, maximum width that we need on it. So now, since I'm copying one grip into another grip, I'm literally just going to take and mark the midpoint. I'm going to mark where this fat end starts, where it stops, and we're going to mark these two V grooves here. So what I'm going to do now, make these marks a little easier to see. And I'm going to cut V grooves in on each 4 of these lines. It's going to correspond with this groove, this groove, this groove, and this groove. Now I need to take my spindle gouge and taper these from the center down to the ends. Okay, now we're going to take a little benchtop sander. We're going to sand this down so that the ring fits flush up against, bottoms out against the grip. They're going to sand this mess off the end and get that nice and smooth. So let's do the front first. Here we go. Now she bottoms out good. Take this sharp edge off of here. I'm going to clean off this end. Now we're all done with the lathe and the benchtop sander. You see we got the rings fitted nicely. We got everything all sanded nice and smooth. Well, smooth enough for something that's going to end up painted. You remember all those holes I was worried about in the piece of firewood? Kind of worried this grip was going to look like Swiss cheese. If you notice, the only hole, and it's hard to see, that made it all the way through to the grip is this little guy right there. So what started off as a pretty rough looking piece of firewood, something we were going to throw in our campfire anyway, turned into a pretty nice looking grip that's going to end up on a vintage garden tractor. So the only thing I have left to do now is put some grain filler in here, prime it, paint it, glue them together, and then we'll all be done. And here is the final product. You can see both handlebar grips have been sealed, painted, and clear coated, and the original metal rings have been fitted just nicely onto the grips and painted black. So the only thing left to do now is to install them on the tractor and put them to use. Thank you again for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you on another episode.